A very good day to all who have connected across the world for this webinar session. A special greeting from Asia Pacific University, Malaysia, and Kumaraguru College of Liberal Arts and Science, Tamil Nadu, India, who have jointly brought this webinar session to you. Let me introduce myself. I'm Edwin, Program Leader for Visual Effects and Concept Design from the School of Media Arts and Design, Asia Pacific University, Malaysia. And I am excited to be your host for the day. First, I'd like to welcome all participants who have joined us for this session. Welcome all. We have been thrilled by the response we've shown to this webinar. More than 400 participants have registered, which shows your eagerness to learn even during this lockdown period. Just like you, I also believe that learning is a continuous process. Lockdown, no lockdown, learning does continue. Today's topic and discussion will be on animation as a communication tool. As we have today with us Mr. Jack, Program Leader for Animation of Asia Pacific University. Thus, to enlighten on how animation has been influencing our life and how effectively animation can be used as a communication tool. Mr. Jack has more than 8 years of experience in animation industry, and as much as you are eager to listen to it, I am. Thank you, Mr. Jack, for being with us today. I like to quote the global animation, VFX, and games industry strategy trends and opportunities 2019 as forecast that the total value of global animation industry is projected to reach around USD 70 billions by 2020. Now that is one good motivation for us to embark into learn more about animation. On that note, we will commence the session with Mr. Jack shortly. I would like to reiterate, please do leave back your name and your university name in the live chat session, and to ensure that we'll be able to send you the e-certificates of participation within the next 3 days. I wish you again a warm welcome to all of you who have joined us today. Thank you, and I hand over to Mr. Jack now for the session. Over to you, Mr. Jack.
Hello, greeting everyone. So before I start my session, I would just like to play videos of Asia Pacific University. Again on the video. So good evening again, everyone, and thank you very much for Mr. Evin for the opening. Okay, sorry for the replay on the video for twice because we as artists we always seek for perfections. we must have the visual and audio in line, then only we are considered okay. So first of all, I would like to thank to APU and also Kumala Guru College for the opportunity for me to basically have my first ever webinar, okay, which is basically a very unique experience. So just let me turn on my webcam also so that at least you can recognize that is me that is basically giving up the presentation. Okay, so this is a very unique experience, like I say, okay, because it's during this pandemic period, and I hope everyone is actually doing fine at this moment, because like myself, I am at home. Yeah, I'm actually doing this webinar at my dining room. Okay, so hopefully the knowledge that I can share today would be able to benefit for the rest of my audience over here. So before I actually start my topic, so I would just like to introducing myself. So just some of my background throughout the years. So until now, this year 2020, I actually have a 10-year experience in the animation industry. So for this year is my fourth year teaching in Asia Pacific University. And last year September, I'm also certified as a Toon Boom certified professional for Harmony and also Storyboard Pro. And throughout this year, I'm also a freelance artist which specialize in the 3D rigging. So just to share with you that some of the project that I have involved in, okay, some of it I involved directly as an artist, and then part of it is basically indirectly as a freelance artist. Okay, so it's just to share with you some of the project that I work on, and mostly on the project I'm in charge on the rigging process. Okay, so back to our topics today. So just give a quick outline on what we're going to cover on the class today. Not a class, okay, I used to a class, it's a webinar. Okay, so the first part I'm going to just introduce or just go through some fundamentals ideas on what animation is. And on the second part, what I will do is I will go into how animation can basically communicate ideas to the audience. So a very common question that we used to ask to the public, or when I'm doing the marketing service and whatsoever, or even my friends around. So when I ask them what is animation, so normally the common questions that I have asked, okay, the answer that I usually receive is animation is cartoons. Okay, so that is the stereotype perceptions that the public actually have on animation itself. All right, so animation itself is basically have a lot more than just a cartoon. Okay, cartoon is just one part of the content that animation itself can actually produce. All right, so animations, any product that created with the act of animating can be considered as an animation product. So as long as we use the act of animating in the product, is considered as animation. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go through all these type of animations, and we will get a better idea what animation is all about before we goes into the headlines today, how animation can basically communicate ideas to the audience. Animations, we can show the illusions of movement through the frame by frame approach. So for those who are fresh to animations, or you are never in contact with animation, so you might ask, so what is a frame to frame approach? So I just give a simple example over here. For example, if I want this ball to move from the left to the right, so what the animators will basically do on frame 1, we'll basically pose our, for example, the ball as an example. Okay, on the second frame, we'll basically change the position of the ball, okay, by moving it in front. So when we basically switch between the frame, you will basically notice that the ball is moving. So if I add another frame, so you'll notice that this ball is basically moving, started to move from left to right. Okay, so this is basically the first idea that we have to understand on animations by using the frame by frame approach. Also in animations, we have an animation principle, which is basically the key animation principle. In order for us to control how fast do we want this ball to be, okay, the bigger the gap between the ball, the faster the ball is. Then the next few examples over here, in frame number 3, 4, 5, 6, we notice that the ball actually slow down. Okay, so this is basically how we can manipulate the timing and spacing in animation itself. Okay, so this is basically just the first idea how we should actually understand how animation actually works. And the 1 second that we normally see in a frame itself is basically equals to 24 frames, which means the time that you spend to blink now or listen to my talk now is already more than 24 frames, which means the animation itself in 1 second of the frame that you watch, we basically have to produce at least 12 to 24 pieces of drawing. And in animations, like any other visuals graphics that we do, okay, we are basically using the graphical representations to form an individual frames. So whatever lines, text, forms, photograph, or whatsoever that we use to do designing, we are included into one individual frames. But what you see over here is basically around 24 to 50 frames of the animations. So animation itself, we basically have more than what a static graphics actually have. And how we actually produce animation. So animation can actually produce in many ways. Okay, the most common ways that we used to heard about is basically 2D animation, 3D animations, and also stop motion animations. Of course, animation can also be produced by using, for example, oil painting, sand, or we can use any physical live object, cloth. As long as you can think about, you can imagine it, we can actually produce with using animation. So we take 2D animations for example. Okay, 2D animation is basically produced by drawing of each frame. As you can see at the bottom of the pictures, there's some small cubes or boxes over there. So those are actually frames, or those are actually drawings, which means in the frames, in the animations, I think this is around 80 frames, which is around 3 seconds animations. There is around, I think, quite numbers of drawings that the animators will have to produce. As in 3D animation, okay, we are basically produce the animations by animating the skeletal rigs. Okay, so we are basically produce most of it in the 3D space itself. Whereas in stop motion animations, we are producing it by moving the joint articulations of the stop motion puppets. Okay, and we're using the traditional cameras to capture it frame by frame. And with the technology advancement, the process of animation itself has been developed significantly. Okay, as you can see on the top left, okay, this is how I used to start my animation career, which we are basically drawing on a lot of piece of paper. I still remember that I actually brings the 2 whole big stacks of papers to school every day. Okay, because every frame means, let's say for example, in frame 1 second is equal to 24 frames. If my animation itself is, let's say, 100 seconds, which means I need to bring 2,400 pieces of paper and I have to produce that. And with the technology advancement, now I only actually need to bring a drawing pad, okay, which I can actually draw on screen by itself. And also with the technology advancements, okay, the quality of animations is also improved significantly. We can see on the left is basically the Lion King on 2004, and also comparison to the Lion King movies, or they consider, or they actually categorize as an animations, okay, on 2019. Okay, so with the technology advancements, a lot of these things have been improved as well. Animation itself can also be existed in many different formats. Okay, let's take the first example, animated feature film. Okay, this is the most common that we normally see in the cinema. A feature film is basically a film format that is more than 40 minutes. Okay, any film that is more than 40 minutes, we categorize it as a feature film. And if it's produced by using animations or animated character, we are basically categorized as animated feature film. Okay, and this film is basically a popular film that we used to watch in the cinema. And the next format that we're going to discuss is basically on the animated TV series, which is basically broadcast over on different episodes. Okay, it's basically those channels that we normally watch on Cartoon Networks and also Nickelodeon channels. Also, I believe we all like superheroes movie. We like to watch action movies. So all these from nowadays, I can say is around 50 to 60% is basically animated. Okay, like for example, for Avengers, all those action scene, all those destructions and whatsoever, as long as it involves the act of animating, okay, that can consider as an animation product. Like the hub that you actually see in Avengers is basically fully animated. Okay, as well as Alvin and the Chipmunks, which is also one of the famous and the latest Sonics, and also the traditional animations, Looney Tunes animation on Space Jam. Of course, animation can also use in advertisement and also commercials. I believe when we are young, okay, and all the kids product is basically put by using the animated character. Of course, this is the new trend now, okay, gaming industry. So all those characters we can actually see in the front, okay, not the front, in the games itself, because games nowadays they are basically emphasized a lot in the game cinematic. So all those characters in the games or films, or we call it CGI, okay, they are basically mostly, okay, or I could say like 50-60%, they are basically have to be fully animated by an animators, because without animators or without animations, those characters are just a static model itself. Of course, another 50% is basically on motion capture. Alright. So another famous medium that animations likes to do is basically on a public service announcement. That is because animation itself can use a lot of different representations of characters in representing the issues that we would like to announce or discuss or to share with the public. And also on the research and development. Okay, we actually see mostly applies on the medical or mechanisms, engineering, and so on. So with animation at place, so what animation can do is it can basically explains with richer. Okay, we can express what we want to sell visually. So now it comes to our key topics today: animation as a communication tool. So as we have discussed earlier on, okay, the normal perceptions that we have on animation itself is animation is an entertainment product, which we watch it for fun or for our leisure times. So animation itself is basically a very powerful communication tools. Okay, so first let's discover or let's explore what animation itself can do. Animation, we can use it to enhance the visual presentations of our graphical image. For example, the web banner that we used to see when we surf the website and whatsoever. So of course, the visual itself is appealing, but with animations, we can basically make this even more appealing. And with animations, we can highlight what do we actually want the audience to look at. Okay, so animation itself, it has this power basically to enhance the visual representations, and by using animation we can actually lead the audience attention. So for example, on this few example that I can share over here, if we are looking at this image over here, okay, we might confuse, or we might have our own interpretation, whether I want to look from the left, I want to look from the bottom right, I want to look from the upper left, or so on. Okay, but with animation itself, it becomes motion graphics, okay, which is basically telling us where should I actually focus when I look at the visual. Should I look from left? Should I look from the right? Should I look at this first, or should I look for that? In animations, by using animation itself, we can basically set the sequence. How do we actually want this to be shown to the audience itself? So we are basically controlling what do we want the audience to see, instead of an individual poster, which is left to the audience to interpret. Of course, this is basically the most powerful things that animation can do. It can bring any objects to life. So, I believe this is pretty famous during the pandemic period. Okay, everyone fight for the toilet paper roll. So, let's just sit back and think for a while. What can a toilet paper roll actually do other than his normal task in the washroom? Okay, but with animations, I can easily turn him into a character. I can turn the paper into a cape, and I can turn it into a flexible arm afterwards. Okay, all this is just by using my imagination. Okay, and I can turn it into a characters. I just need to instill some sort of characteristic into it, and I have to think about how I can basically make use of all his parts. And animation itself is considered as a multi-modal text. So what is a multi-modal text? Is basically combinations of different mode. The first one is a visual mode, second is audio mode, and third one is a written mode. So what is the multi-modal text? Is basically in animation itself, we have visual, which we can see, and we have audio, which we can hear, and sometimes in animation itself we also have a written mode, which is a written text, which can basically use to interpret meanings. That's why we call it a multi-modal text. And animation can communicate messages to the audience and make meanings of something. So let me just ask a simple questions over here. We see two similar representations of ball on the screen, so we can take a few seconds to think which ball is heavier. Okay, of course, by looking at the screen, they are look totally the same, but by using animation, we can basically give weight to the ball. Without animations, this ball, they are no meaning, they are just a ball. But with animations, I can tell the audience which ball is heavier and which ball is lighter. Similar, if you look at these representations of a ball with tail over here, so ask yourself the questions, is this a male or a female? But if I play animations now, then you can basically tell it clearly whether it is a female or it is a male. Okay, so animation itself, we can instill characteristic into the character and to make it looks appealing. So that is basically the power that animations have. It can communicate, it can give meanings, okay, it can instill characteristic, and for the audience to interpret correctly. Besides the basics communications, animation itself can disseminate complex societal ideologies, concepts, values, beliefs, and also culture. So what do I mean by that is basically these messages are disseminating through the narrative and representations in the story itself. Narrative is basically the story, and representation is basically the graphical representations forms of the character in the story. Let's just take Brave for example. So Brave itself is basically challenging, is basically discussing about the social issues of gender, which the characters in the main character, Marina, if I'm not mistaken, is her name. So her characteristics are basically challenging the traditional stereotype of a female. So traditionally, female are often portrayed as weak and soft, and like many other Disney films, they are portrayed as weak and waiting for the prince to rescue. So in Brave itself, the character is basically instilled with an androgyny characteristic, which is the combination of masculine and feminine, which is the main traits and also female traits. Okay. Next example is the Princess and the Frogs. Okay, instead of the entertainment value itself, these animations basically discussing about race. Okay, this Princess and the Frogs, the princess itself is basically the first princess in Disney with color, which is in darker skin color, and this is basically in relations to the political scenario in United States. Okay, and is basically in line with the presidential of Barack Obama during 2009 to 200 to 2017. Okay, so it's basically challenging these ratios representations of the traditional animations. And in Kung Fu Panda itself is basically representing the culture aspect of China, the Chinese culture, as well as in Zootopia, okay, as many other films or animations, all the characters is basically holding some sort of role, okay, and all these characters are normally fall into the traditional gender role or societal role. For example, male are normally portrayed in a higher social classes and with a better job opportunity, while female are always portrayed as a mother or caretakers at home. And through Incredibles, so it's basically portray some sort of family values to the audience itself. And of course, this is one of my favorites. So Wall-E. So without any dialogues throughout the whole animation itself, and by using a two representations of robots, it basically tells a stories of love between two robots, two objects that without emotions. And these successful animated characters are as a cultural icons. Why is the cultural icons is some sort of role model, okay, for the kids to basically reference at. Okay, a social learning theory posits, say people learn by watching how others behave and mimics that behaviors. So in short, we do what they do. So we can learn from anyone. We can learn from our peers. We can learn from our teacher. We can learn from our parents, and we can actually learn from the animated character as well. Especially when these characters are having a very heavy positions in kids' mind. For example, I still remember when I was young, after I watched Superman, I will basically put on the red colored capes and I basically standing on top of the coach and then I basically jump down from there. Okay, so I will ask myself, I want to be strong like Superman. And of course, for those girls, after you have watched Disney Princess, what you will basically do is basically you will go and buy a dress and dress like those princess. Of course, the most famous one nowadays is on Frozen. Also, animation can seen as a representation of a society where the basic cultures and norms are articulated. And these accumulations of messages in animations suggest what is normal in the society and what is not. For example, the way we dress, the way we behave, and the way we speak. Okay, everything that we do is basically depicted by the way society basically enforce. We are basically follow some sort of rules. For example, a female couldn't do this, a male cannot do that. Okay, so those are basically an influence from the society. And the shared values, beliefs, and norms about the society could possibly be reinforced. Reinforced basically means it's there already, but it's reinforced through the lens of animation itself. And these portrayal behaviors and norms in animation can be learned and internalized by the audience itself. Of course, this process of socialization, which is the learning process, are highly influential, especially to children, as they are basically spending most of their time watching televisions. And of course, now with the technology advancement, so they are basically free to basically surf on YouTube, Netflix, and all the channels they want anytime and anywhere. Okay, as they spend most of their time, and they are basically targeted as the main target audience. And as culture cultivation theories posits, the repeated exposure to media over time can influence the perception of a social reality. Basically, the more that we watch on the portray or the presented content, the more you will basically influence our perceptions. For example, after I watch a drama on pilots, so I will dreams of becoming a pilot. Or after I watch an action movie, then I will feel that I would like to basically do some actions afterwards. So the more that I watch, the more that I will be influenced by those portrayal. And of course, their popularity can be used for commercial purpose. Of course, the most obvious example that I can provide is basically on the Disney. Okay, all those characters, basically for Disney film itself, the profit they are basically gaining are mainly from the merchandising itself instead of the film. Okay, so this is basically one way for us to basically use the animated character for commercial purpose. Okay, so I can also bring in an example from a local content in Malaysia. This is Upin and Ipin, which this film itself has been recently nominated as the top 10 of Oscar. Okay, although it doesn't win the Oscar, but we think that it has been a big milestone that Malaysian animations are actually achieving. Okay, so this company, Les Kopak itself, is basically adopting the similar strategy from Disney, which they are basically using all their main characters, okay, their popularity, and to put into merchandising, and also they are producing their own games based on the characters. So let's just have a break over here and see. Let me just look at those questions that have been asked online. Which is the basic animation software for amateurs? These questions I think is depending on what kind of animation method they are looking forward. So if you will ask me, I will suggest you to look for those software that the industry is actually using it. For example, like in APU, so our student for 2D animations, they are basically using Toon Boom Harmony and also Storyboard Pro for storyboarding, and also for Maya, we are basically using Maya for 3D animations, because these two are the software that have been used commonly in the industry. So if you like to learn this software for your futures employabilities or your future careers, I think it's better for you to learn the software that is related to the industry. Does animated content spread unequal gender roles? I would say definitely yes. Okay, based on a lot of research that I basically read on, the female are actually all under representations. Okay, which means like most of the movies that we see or most of the film that we see is basically heavily on a single characters or a single gender. For example, for Disney, Okay, most of their target audience, since it's a girl, so what happens is they were basically emphasizing on the female characteristic or the female gender traits, whereas for the actions movie itself, we normally see there will be more male character representations in the film itself. Okay, of course, this is basically a topics that have been discussed for a while, and I believe there's actually a lot of improvement from the recent film that we actually see. Like for example, on Brave itself, okay, I believe it's a very huge breakthrough, which we can basically see a female that is basically having a masculine characteristic inside. How do you keep up with animation trends? So how do I keep up with animation trends? I'm in contact with all the industry, the animation industry, and although I am teaching for 8 years for now, but I am actually a freelance artist, so I'm still in contact with those industry, and also I have a tutor which teach me for 24 hours, which is YouTube and Google. So anything that I would like to know and everything that I would like to learn, I will basically surf on them, because all the animations, informations, techniques are shared online. Okay, another platform that you can actually look into, which is the Facebook group. Okay, I have been joining in a lot of different animation groups on Facebook itself, where the experts are actually sharing their insights, and for the amateur or the junior artist itself, they are basically in the group as well. So what they do is they basically ask questions in the group wherever they comes into any problems, and they will be expert that helps you to basically troubleshoot your animation problem. And let's look at the next questions. Which are the latest software used on the top productions houses? Okay, I would say this is subjective. Okay, but the most common 3D animation software for animation itself is Autodesk Maya. The reason why I say it's subjective is because most of the big company, of course, they will still use Maya as the main tools. At the same time, they also have a lot of different software, for example, like Cinema 4D, Houdini, Nuke, and whatsoever. Okay, and also if it's a big company, normally it's up to the artist to choose the medium that they prefer. And in a big company like Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, for example, they actually have their own software engineer to basically customize the software for their needs. Let's look at the next one. If I want to become an animator, should need to learn drawing, I would say that is definitely, because drawing, you don't have to be very good in drawing, but you have to love drawing. Okay, because in animation itself, I take 2D animation for example, we can actually explore in different style. We actually see a lot of different style, different preference, different characteristic in the animation itself. Okay, because in animation itself, like I mentioned just now, 1 second that we see in the film or that we watch in the animation itself is 24 frames. So imagine you have to draw 24 frames for that 1 second. Imagine it's a feature film. Okay, that's why I say you don't have to be very good, but you have to love drawing. How cultural values are play a vital role in Kung Fu Panda series? Can I explain it? So we can see one good things in Kung Fu Panda is basically produced by a Western company. Okay, so but what the production team actually do is they basically have a trips to China itself. Okay, what they do is they basically reference, they basically pick up the details, they doing interview, they doing survey. So instead of creating something from scratch or from their imagination, they are basically referring to some sort of cultural aspect, and that is also helps in promoting the cultural contents for some countries, for example. What inspire you when making animations? So for myself, I love to draw since I was young, so I just draw every day. no matter what, no matter when. So even though in my exercise book is all drawings actually, and I love drawing, so that I think that is what gets me into animations. And I love animations because I can produce something based on my own imagination. Can you tell us the importance of storyboarding and scripting for animation films? I would say this is the most top important things if you would like to produce an animation film, because without a good story there's no meaning or there's no message to tell. Of course, sometimes we will say, okay, so I can create the animations for my portfolio, show and whatsoever. So those are for your personal. Okay, but if you would like to have an audience to basically watch your film, the storyboarding process is crucial, because if you didn't build the foundations of the story properly through the storyboarding process, you might actually wasted the whole efforts or your whole timeline just to recreate everything again. So I would say scripting and also storyboarding is the far most important things before we actually goes into the animation production. Those have to be locked down. There is always resistance of by elder generation for the use of animation into educational section. Your thoughts? My thought is it will change soon. Okay, as the trend that we see nowadays, my father, my grandfather, my grandma, they are all using phone. So when you are in touch with digital content, if the things is static, then it will be boring. Of course, if you want to make the things appealing, we have to add animation inside. So even though like iPhone, for example, or Samsung, whenever you click on a button, you'll see some pop. So that is actually considered part of the animation as well, because it's deal with some timing and spacing, and there's an act of animations inside. So I can foresee most of the things that we will touch on or interact on in the future, it will be animated. That's why I emphasize this at the beginning of the talks, that animation itself is basically more than just entertainment. It's just more than just cartoon. And let's look at the next question. So I have a lot of questions here. So does having more frames in animations conveys better information? I would say no. Okay, as long as your frames able to tell the story correctly or accurately, I would say that is a good animations, because the animation itself we can create it on 8 frames per second, like our classical stop motion animation. The first animation that ever created is created on 6 frames per second. Okay, so the frame per second does not define how good is the animation itself, but the story does. The translated version of Western cartoon or animated series interprets the regional cultural values and behaviors among children. Your view? I would say it basically depends on the original versions of the film itself. Of course, like Malaysia itself, we do have the translated versions of animation also. Of course, some of the words that might be changed or might be substitute if it's touch on some sensitive or cultural issues on the country itself. But at the end of the day, the translated version is also based on the action. For example, if the character is acting on running, for example, in the animations, so we cannot basically put in translations that is basically sitting still. So it's all have to match. So the translation is actually based on the original drawing. So the drawings come first. Must a person have good drawing skills to create a drawing, create an animation? So similar answer to the previous questions. You don't have to be very good, but you have to love drawing. Okay. Of course, some of you might say, I don't like to draw, but can I still do animations? Of course, maybe you can consider 3D animations, but with the 2D or with the drawing skills that you have, it will basically helps you to visualize your 3D better. Let's scroll through. Tell me about a time you find it difficult to make others accept your ideas. What did you do? I will convince them with the best that I can, because sometimes when we create some ideas, for example, because I face this a lot with students as well. So when they propose an idea, they will expect the first idea to be accepted. So as an artist itself, I think we have to be receptive. We have to accept the comments and critiques from others. Your first idea or your last idea doesn't mean that is the best idea. So we have to learn to adapt, and we have to learn to accept. That's a reason why people say so also. Does animation have influence only on certain age group? How do we make it appealing to all age group? This is a very good question, but something that you have to consider is the things that you show on screen. Like for example, doesn't matter it's a animated film, doesn't matter it's a TV series or whatsoever, you have to look for the target audience, because without a targeted audience, you cannot design a film, or you cannot design something for everyone. There is nothing as such, okay, because of the commercial purpose also. For example, when we are watching a animated series or cartoons on Cartoon Networks, okay, if you pay attention on the commercials that is playing during the period, and the commercial that playing during the news broadcast, so you'll basically see two different type of commercial, because that is how the broadcaster is actually making money. Okay, so it's basically driven by the commercial purpose. Okay, kindly explain the difference between Maya and 3D Max. I would say the 3D aspect or the 3D knowledge is the same. As long as I understand what is 3D all about, it's easily for me to switch from Maya to 3D Max, because the fundamental ideas of creating something is the same. That's why the most important things that we have to do is basically to understand the fundamentals of the animations or the fundamentals of 3D. Okay, what difference between different software is basically just the name of the tools, the application of the tools, and also where we basically look for the tools. Let me see the next one. How is the scope of traditional animations? I think the traditional animation still have its very high values. Okay, because traditional animation itself, the traditional animation that I'm talking about is basically digitized. Okay, because all the production house nowadays, we are basically moving on to a digital type of animation, but we are still using the traditional hand-drawn method, which we draw it frame by frame. That can basically give us much more flexible flows in animation. And open software, I believe you are mentioning Blenders. So Blender itself is a very powerful software, of course, but all these production house, why they are still stick with Maya itself or some software like 3D Max and whatsoever, because they are using in the production for some time, and the production pipeline have been built out. Of course, nowadays there's much more companies have been slowly switching to Blenders. I believe Blender itself is a coming up giant in the 3D animations and also 2D animation software. Oh, link my video. Okay, let me just adjust my video for a while. I have forgot about this one. I just make it bigger so that you can see me clearer. Full screen now. What is rotoscoping in animation and process? Rotoscoping in animations is basically we are putting another image at the back, and we are just redraw on top of the animation itself. What it means is basically is like we are tracing the poses. Of course, rotoscoping, we can basically just to trace the poses or timing of the character. So it's no different. It's basically just putting another paper on top and then we are tracing it. What kind of basic animation software you are recommending to the rurals and tribal kids? Give them details of free software. I think I can share a list of the free software later on. Of course, for 3D is Blender, and for 2D we actually have some open software as well. So maybe I can share in the links later on. In today's world, animation is used tremendously in different fields, as you say. Do you think that learning animation is a must for everyone who wanted to make movie? It's not necessary for everyone who wants to learn movie. As long as you have the interest in it, I think you can learn animation, because animation itself is actually not hard. Okay, animation, you can produce your own animation content as well. It doesn't necessarily have to make for a movie. You can use it to basically greet your friend, or you can use it for your presentation purposes, like for your class presentation and so on. Instead of using the conventional way, why don't you just go with animation? It's just another method for us to communicate or to presenting ideas to the audience. From Pixel 12 animation principles, what are the most important principles of animation for a basic animation that looks pleasing? The most important animation principles is timing and spacing, because that defines everything on your animation. Without timing and spacing, basically there's no meaning of your animation, because it's not moving. Okay, your animation is static without timing and spacing. As a beginner in animation, can I learn the nouns of animation in Blender and Cintiq? Of course you can. Okay, like I said, the animations tools like Blender's Maya, they are just a tools. What you need to understand first is the fundamental of animations, and also how you can actually apply it in these different tools. It's just like a pen. Okay, as long as I know how to draw, I can draw with a pen, I can draw with pencil, I can draw with a charcoal. Do you not have any idea how much a freelance could charge for a simple lesson? For 2D learning courses production, current market price roughly. For local, for Malaysia, I think it could be up to like 3,000 to 4,000. Okay, it's actually depending on what kind of courses or what kind of lessons that you are looking for. Some courses, they are basically emphasizing on the technical side or on the software itself. As long as you learn the software, then it meets the objective. But there's another type of training or courses which are emphasized on the production itself. Okay, that outcome will basically to make sure that the participants or the trainees are able to understand the overall workforce and actually put it into practical application. Right. How do you try to visualize your story so that the animations and the story goes together? I think this is depends on the art direction that we set. Okay, of course, every story basically we have a concepts behind it. For example, if you want to do an animation that is cutters for girls or females, for example, or for kids, so there are some sort of rules that you must be applied. For example, you cannot be too violent. Okay, the character have to be cute, the color has to be vibrant. So we have to understand our target audience. Then we'll decide what kind of style or what kind of feature that we want to apply on our animation itself. Do you watch anime? Okay, honestly, I don't watch anime. Okay, but I love to watch the other type of animation. Okay, the reason why I do not like to watch anime itself is not because it's not nice. It's because they are very draggy. So to finish one whole anime, I need to spend like a long time. Okay, so I actually prefer those short films which is short and also compact, and I can basically get what I want from that small film itself. So the last questions here, what are the best job in animation industry? The best job in the animation industry is the job that you love to do. Okay, of course you do not want to pick the job that you are not keen at, or you are not interested at, or maybe you are forced at, you got no choice. Pick the one that you have the far most interest at. For example, like myself, I started as an animator, but now I'm a 3D rigger because I found my interest and my passion in the rigging process itself. Okay, so we have answered quite a number of questions over here. So I will just make this smaller a little bit. But before I end my sessions over here, I would just like to share a animation showreel that is basically done by my student itself. Okay, so I would like to share it, and from the animation showreel itself you can basically see different type of animation method, and you can also see different type of personality, different type of visualizations. Okay, so let me just go back to the slide itself. And okay, this is basically just my conclusion itself. Animation is a powerful communication tool which is more than just an animation product. So let's just enjoy the showreel from my student. And thank you for spending time with me today. So I will pass my stage back to our host for today, which is Mr. Edwin. Of course, if you have any questions in the future, you can always email me. So this is my email, or you can basically just send me a mail if you have any things you would like to follow up and you would like to talk to.
Thank you, Mr. Jack. Thank you for that inspiring session. It was really, you gave us the ways in which animation can be used as a communication tool effectively. Thank you so much. And I believe the audience also would have had a wonderful time. I like to thank all the wonderful participants for taking part in this session. A lot of questions that we are not able to answer at this point in time, but we make it a point that we will be messaging you in the YouTube comment status so that you can check your answers there. Please do leave behind your feedback. I've shared you the feedback form, the correct one now. So please take time to give your valuable feedbacks. We would look forward so that better and better webinar session for you. Uh, on that note, I also like to thank Guru College of Liberal Arts and Science Management, Sigila, Leo for the support, and from my end, I would like to thank Mr. Jack again, and the School of Media Arts and Design head of the department for helping us assist and organize this session. So we look forward to the next session, and then uh, we would like to share you what we have in store for you. So Jack, can you switch on to the next slide, please? There you go. So our next session for 15th May, which is next Friday, same time, 3 p.m. Indian Standard Time and 5:30 p.m. Malaysian Standard Time. We will bring to you storytelling through photography, making better travel photograph by Mr. Nithil Dennis. He's an assistant professor of mass communication from Royal Thimphu College, Bhutan, and he's a former director of Simri of the School of Photography, Pune, India. So I'm sure this webinar will be equally interesting as today. For all the shutterbugs out there, we invite you to this webinar session. We will be sending you the invitation. Please do log in and let's learn together. This is Edwin, signing off from Asia Pacific University. Looking forward to meet you next webinar. Thank you very much.